Loretta Jones Gilbert, and I'm a board member of the Amistad Research Center. I want to thank Tulane University's Office of Multicultural Affairs, the Office for Gender and Sexual Diversity, and Newcomb College Institute for partnering with Amistad in bringing two very dynamic thought leaders to New Orleans. Created by the Amistad Research Center, Conversations in Color is a free public cultural series that features artists, educators, and community activists in talks about their work and its impact on social change. In witnessing millions of women marching around the world this weekend, for you, and as I felt, it was a great day and time for justice and inclusion. It is truly an honor tonight to introduce our guest presenters tonight, who also represent those two values. Elizabeth Alexander is the author of 6 books of poetry, including American Sublime, a finalist for the 2005 Pulitzer Prize, 2 collections of essays, and The Light of the World, her critically acclaimed memoir on love and loss. Her writing explores such subjects as race, gender, politics, art, and history. Elizabeth was recently named the Won Sun Tam Mellon Professor in the Humanities at Columbia University. Alicia Garza, our next guest, is an Oakland-based organizer, writer, public speaker, and freedom dreamer. I love that. Who's currently the Special Projects Director for the National Domestic Workers Alliance, the nation's leading voice for dignity and fairness for millions of domestic workers in the United States. Garza, along with Opal Tometi and Patrice Cullors, also co-founded the Black Lives Matters Network, a globally recognized organizing project that focuses on combating anti-Black, state-sanctioned violence and the oppression of all Black people. Please join me in welcoming to the stage Elizabeth Alexander and Alicia Garza.
Good evening.
Good evening.
And good evening to you all as well. We are meeting each other for the first time tonight. Excited to meet each other. I'm so excited to meet you. I'm so honored to meet you. I'm so proud of the work that you do, and I'm so excited for this conversation.
Thank you. Me too. Let's do it.
Okay. And we're going to just talk to each other. We have many things we want to talk to each other about and share with each other. So we can start any number of places.
Okay, let's do it.
Okay. So I could start. I wanted to ask you, I think about all the different ways, you know, a phrase that you coined, Black Lives Matter, you've said started when you wanted to write a love letter to Black people. And when I saw that phrase, I thought, I actually want to make every American write a love letter to Black people. You know, as a sort of ongoing project. Everywhere we go, what if that was something we asked people to do? What would that look like? What would we hear? What would it mean for people to stop, maybe who are not necessarily in community with us every day, and say, I'm going to think about where in me there is a love letter to Black people and what kind of force that would unleash in the world. So I was in thinking about that and the power of words. I wanted to ask you more about words and words that are talismans to you, words you keep with you, and also when you had a sense of yourself as someone for whom words were a gift.
Oh, these are good questions. First of all, hi. It's good to be in New Orleans. It's one of my favorite cities. One of my favorite words that I hold with me a lot is possibility. And I, like many of us, actually spend a lot of my waking life lamenting about what's wrong. And so possibility is what I hold with me to keep dreaming about what could be right and what it could look like and what it would feel like and how we might be different. And I do that because of a few reasons. One, I think in this political climate, it's more important than ever to believe in something. Mm-hmm. And we're in a moment where we've had a lot of heartbreaks. Yes. And that hasn't just been true over the last year. I think that's been true since the levees broke here. Mm-hmm. Something broke in our spirits that I think has needed healing for a long time. And it impacts how we understand what's possible. It impacts who we see ourselves as, and it also impacts who we come into relationship with on purpose. And so possibility to me is about transforming our relationships to each other. Mm-hmm. It's about transforming whatever we understand as the left so that we can be powerful and effective and win. Mm-hmm. And it's also very much about reimagining who we can be together. So one of the things that moves me around Black Lives Matter is that we keep pushing ourselves to articulate what is possible. And it's not about doing small fixes to what already exists. What already exists doesn't work, and we can tinker with it as much as we want, but there's a point that we have to come to. Hi, Cherry. There's a point where we have to come to that it grieves the loss of what we keep being told is the stability that is underneath us. And then there's also a challenge to each of us to continue to bring forward in small ways and in big ways another way of doing things that is equitable, hi Sage, that is just, that is deeply human, and that can birth the world that we long for. Yep. So all of those things kind of have to be in relationship to each other for me. Mm-hmm. So that's where possibility is that talisman that I'm holding a lot of the time.
Mm-hmm. And when you were a child, I've been thinking a lot about little girl, Alicia, and I wonder what child you were in your family. Where was your voice and yourself in your family and in your community?
I grew up as an only child for the first 8 years of my life. So I spent a lot of time alone. My mom, when she had me, she was a single mother. She didn't expect to have me. Mm-hmm. I should say she didn't expect to have me alone. Mm-hmm. And that ended up being her situation. And so she had to figure it out really quick. And so what that meant was that my mom worked during the day, and her twin brother joined her in California, moved out to California from Toledo, Ohio, and worked at night so that she could be with me. But what that meant was that I had to do a lot of things on my own, and I learned very early to enjoy my own company. Mm-hmm. And so I love being by myself, which is a challenge for an organizer. Yeah. In fact, right after this, I'll probably be like, I just need 5 minutes by myself. Just to recollect. I also had a period where I didn't sleep at night. And I don't think anything was like wrong with me. I think there were two things going on. One, I think my mind is just active. And so I would stay up late and I would create things. I would watch Nickelodeon, Nick at Night, and I'd watch, shows like Mr. Ed and Car 54, Where Are You? Which is not at all it's not shows from my generation at all, but I love them. And I would do these art projects. You know, I would take my school pictures and I would cut out the lines on binder paper and do designs in them and build frames for them, build tents and sit under there with a flashlight and read my books. I was obsessed with books. But I also think that what was going on was that I was interacting with spirit. Yes. And I don't think I knew that then, but when I look back on it now and just in my patterns that have come forward since then, I'm very much a night person. I do my best everything at night and like in the middle of the night. And that's when I feel the most me. So that was me as a kid. I also had my mom will tell you this, I had a very eclectic sense of style. I insisted on dressing myself, and my mom hated it. She was like, girl, really? This is what we're doing today? I'd be like, yes, this is what we're doing. So that's still happening, clearly. And I was really inquisitive. I wanted to know why things happened, why my dad wasn't there. I wanted to know why my mom had to work so hard. I wanted to know if she was lonely. I had questions for her that she didn't want to answer, but she did because she's amazing. But I was a very inquisitive child, and I think that has also kind of carried forward to today. So I'm always asking, what's that about? What's underneath that? What are you taking care of? What needs taking care of for you? And that helps me better understand whatever context or dynamics that I'm engaging with.
I'm so moved, and it's so familiar to me, that kind of, in stretches there, I felt that you were describing how I was as a child as well. You know, who's she talking to in there? There's nobody there, but there were people there. Exactly. I mean, and I think that I never thought of it, I never would have put it in the words of, you know, interacting with spirit. But I do think that that is what it is, and eventually figuring out that I was a poet, I think was a way of kind of making sense of all of that self-contained invention, and sort of asking the question that was the importune question, that there wasn't a space for it, but that was the question. So that's very resonant to me.
What were your favorite things to write poetry about?
Well, you know, I just wrote and wrote and wrote and wrote and wrote, and it wasn't even always about things. Sometimes it was just language. Very abstract, you know, trying to kind of make material in words what I felt or saw or smelled or experienced, and somehow knowing that I didn't have to necessarily make sense of it. Later on, when I really became a poet as a practice, the inner lives of young black women was always a good topic of infinite interest. And inside of those inner lives, you know, there's kind of everything, but I think like a sense of interiority, and that sometimes the interior is not reconciled with the exterior. I found also, because as I was practicing and becoming a poet, I was also becoming a scholar and studying literature and studying black literature and deepening my knowledge of black literature and culture, and that would soon become my life's work as far as my day job went. So what I found in the archive and in black history and in our stories was an infinite trove of material. You know, the stories that weren't told. We were looking backstage at, you know, just black expressive amazingness that is everywhere. It's infinite. I tell my students now, you know, if what you choose is black culture, your life will never be boring. Black people will never bore you.
That is
I mean,
absolutely
you know,
true.
many things about us, but boring is not one of them.
Yes, that's right.
And I think that sense that, you know, that there's just a treasure of an archive. And actually, to that, I brought a few things I want to kind of give to you as readings. And so one of them is, it's a poem I wrote, and it's about the sculptor Elizabeth Catlett. And it takes us into the subject, I think, of black women artists and political activism. And so where it started for me was on the cover of one of my books, I chose a Catlett sculpture called The Black Woman Speaks. And many of you may have seen this, but it's a beautiful wooden sculpture, and on the side of her temple, Catlett has drawn a spiral right on the temple of the woman. So this poem is called The Black Woman Speaks, and it's from the perspective of Catlett at a moment of transition in her life. The Black Woman Speaks. I am 35, and the love of my life, and my great work, and my 3 sons, and my new nation are ahead of me. Goodbye, Chicago. About to set out for the territory, Mexico, for the rest of the century and into the next. My sense of my people will strengthen and shift. But first I had to leave D.C. You have to leave D.C. Lovely colored town that will make a colored girl smile but not stretch or growl or frown with the exertion of thinking, work. Yet there I made my first carving from a cake of ivory soap at Dunbar High School. There I was taught. There I stood in front of the United States Supreme Court with a noose around my neck protesting lynching. There I realized I had a debt I had not paid. I am black because my great-great-grandmother was kidnapped on a beach in Madagascar. In Mexico, I will carve black women's bodies and heads from reddish stone and black stone. Some will be massive, and the work will make me sweat. The black woman's head is a massive weight. The black woman's head holds a black woman's brain. The black woman's body holds a black woman's head. The black woman's work is the work of this world. So, thank you. So, you know, that's an offering, you know, opening up this whole zone that we share, thinking about art and activism and black women moving that forward.
Thank you for sharing that.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
I wonder what you think about, we talk about futures, and I know in your writing, you are writing the future. And so I'm curious about how you imagine, ooh,
There, it's back.
I wonder about how you imagine a black future.
Are you writing for Kimberly's book? We both are. I haven't written my essay yet.
No, I'm writing my own thing.
Okay, okay.
But I was just with her last night.
You were? Okay.
Yes,
This is
I
a
was.
very, very extraordinary young sister named Kimberly Drew, who is really, really a visionary of her own. And it's interesting. She asked me to write about it, and I thought it was very astute. There are a lot of ways to answer that question. So a couple of practical things, aside from the writing. The way I imagine black futures is always about self-determination. We have a long history of self-determination, and I think that that's where our power lies. What I'm interested is in seeing that self-determination also flip some white institutions. You know, I mean, so that you know, I want to see, you know, black leadership in mainstream institutions, black leadership and access to all of that capital. You know, so my own thinking about, I spent the last years at the couple years of the Ford Foundation, and of course it is a social justice philanthropy, and it was amazing work, but it also was, I realized like, oh, all my life actually I've been trying to redistribute wealth, and now there's just a lot of it at this place. And to think, you know, that Henry Ford, who was not a good man, right? By any stretch. But we spend enough his money, right? On things he would never have dreamed, and really trying to help fuel and empower people who have figured out what they need to do. So that's what, when I think about black futures, that's what I think about. When I think about black futures, I also think about, I have 2 sons, they're 18 and 19. And they have been, you know, raised in a very powerful black feminism. And when I see them with their friends, I feel so hopeful because of the way that all of these young people are very, very matter of fact. In fact, they love to say to me like, oh, Mom, you know, like, you don't know, blah, blah. I'm like, actually, I really do know. Been knowing. But I think it's actually very, very wonderful that their sense of what it is to be emerging sexual people and what it means to be in mixed communities and what it means to be young men and how they are with other young people. It's really, really wonderful to see. So I feel like more of that kind of liberation with our young people is important for them to be able to come together and make good communities. I think also when I think about Black futures, I think that to our creative production, I mean, you know, I think often that, isn't it fascinating that to focus on Black people, that, you know, all of the millions of us who were brought here involuntarily, and then we were displaced again with the Great Migration, right? The largest movement of human beings within national borders in like the history of the world. And out of that, in those new spaces, Black people made the culture that rocked and transformed the world, like hands down. And that what we're seeing now that I think that we've chipped away a little bit at the way that beauty and excellence is defined, what we're seeing is the beginnings of an acknowledgement that when, you know, creativity that comes out of writ large oppression, what it takes, you know, when you listen to Black music, I was on the plane listening to my little songs, and I was listening to Heaven Must Be Like This, It Must Be Like This. And I was just thinking about the power of Black love and self-expression in that song, and the force in great Black singing that overwrites all of the oppression. It has to be that powerful in order to overwrite the noise that tries to describe us as unworthy and that seeks to annihilate us. So I think we're still actually, I don't think we've crested on the influence of all of that cultural expression. So I mean, I have, you know, I hold on to powerful visions of Black futures, positive visions of Black futures, in part because, you know, I'm like the glass is half full, but not in a silly kind of way, in a very strategic way. And I think that, you know, I am glad that every day there's someone waiting to respond. You know, responders are very, very important. But I also think that to have so many of us who are putting our energy into supporting the power and the beauty and the lives, I think that force is still uncounted, and that force is much bigger, I really do believe, than so much of the hatred. So that's what I'm seeing.
I got one more.
Okay, except, but then you have to answer that question too. I can't wait to hear you on Black futures.
I will, I promise. But this one first, is that okay?
Yes, yes, yes.
I just need to get in here a little bit. So earlier we were talking about, we actually went down a rabbit hole. I did.
Yes.
We're talking about New Orleans and how spirit is alive here.
Yes.
The lines between life and death are so thin. Mm-hmm. And it made me think about, you know, we're in a particular moment where things are re-emerging and breaking apart and mixing around, and lots of lines are blurred right now. If you had to say which people who are no longer here with us physically, but their spirit is here, who do you think is present at this particular political moment? And what do you think they're trying to tell us about what we need to be and who we need to be right now?
Fire question of life. You know, and you asked that very deep question, and actually the answers came to me very instantly because they're here. So June Jordan is surely here, right? I mean, June Jordan is surely here. And I think I participated in a reading a couple weeks ago because there's now a new fantastic reader of her work called It's On. We're On, sorry. I translated that. It's On. We're On. And what was so amazing about this reading, which was, different writers choosing to read, is that her words were precisely speaking to the here and now. One person said, I wish June were here, and someone else said, June is here. And also, I thought about words and art, and that, her body is not here, but she gave us something that will live forever. And for me, the most powerful thing of those is when she says, where is the love? You have to know not only what you're fighting against, but what you're saying yes to, which is a version of what I said, earlier. So I feel like June Jordan is really here. I feel like Audre Lorde is really here. Really here. And we were talking about how this event is kicking off. It's Audre Lorde Days. I love that, Days. And I think, so her work has been profoundly important to me. I wrote a dissertation in part about her. I mean, very, very important to me. And I think that when I think about all the things that she spoke about that we need right now, I think that, simply your silence will not protect you. Your silence will not protect you. We could sort of chew on that philosophically for a really, really long, long time. And that if young people, especially as they learn to be bold in public and in community when people are trying to shut them down, to really remember that when people are trying to shut them down. And I think also to think about the erotic as power, which is to say, what does a queer black feminist everything look like? What does it mean to take the knowledge of our full selves, right? And use that as just, fossil fuel to take us to the next place. What does it mean when our bodies have been vulnerable in so many ways, and to say we stand safe in our bodies and safe with each other and empowered in our bodies and empowered in our magnificence. That is really a force that moves us forward. So I feel that they are here. My own grandmother, Winona Bond Logan, is always here. And one of the things that she always said to me that I keep with me all the time is whenever, if someone hurt my little feelings or if there was some kind of racial affront, she just, she's like, what? She said, they are so very limited. I feel so sorry for them. I'm not thinking about them anymore. They're limited. So that kind of way of moving past, because I think that one of the things that is also powerful about some of those amazing sisters like Toni Cade and June Jordan and Audre Lorde, as we know, is that we lost them when they were too young. And their bodies, in part, paid the price for their work. So what does it mean to, to use Audre's words, to think about not metabolizing anger, not to metabolize it, not to take it in, I think is something that we need to just keep really rigorously thinking about and practicing. Yeah. How about you? So who do you feel with us now?
I just want to chew on that.
Yes.
You said June, and I have June's words tattooed on my chest.
Oh my goodness. Which words do you have?
The words from a poem about my rights.
Yes.
And it is the stanza that begins with, I am not wrong. Wrong is not my name.
That's
my
right.
My name is.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. June is here.
Did you know her in the Bay Area?
I did not know her personally.
Mm-hmm.
I did not know her personally, but several of my close comrades and mentors became organizers, having gone through her poetry for the people.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful.
And really, I think, influenced me to keep dreaming about culture as organizing.
Mm-hmm.
So oftentimes we separate those things.
Yeah.
There's art and culture, and then there's the real work.
Yeah.
And what June taught them, and then what they have taught me, is that is all interconnected.
Yep.
There's no separation between how we move together and how we use that energy that we move together in the service of what we long for. The other person that I carry with me and that I feel is very present is Harriet Tubman.
Oh, yes.
And I call her Mama Harriet.
Mm-hmm.
She, I think, is telling us to keep going.
Yes.
And, the thing I'm just chewing on right now, too, I'm just coming from Las Vegas, where there was a women's march event. And I'm just chewing. I'm just chewing, because I hear her in that space. And what she's saying is, not everybody's coming. Not everybody's coming with us.
Yep.
But we need to keep moving.
Yep.
And I'm sitting with that a lot, because you all are not strangers to all the controversy that exists around the Women's March. And I am just really feeling like I just don't even want to get deep into that. It's like too obvious. It's too easy, right? It's like, okay, but why not take up space? I don't need permission, and I don't need an invitation.
Yep.
So I'm sitting with that. And, I had an experience there yesterday, and I heard Harriet in my ear, like, girl, not everybody's coming.
Yeah.
But keep going.
Yeah.
And it also made me think a lot about who thought they weren't coming, but they're moving almost outside of their own volition. And that's really who I'm interested in.
Oh, that's so interesting.
Because, Harriet didn't just organize black people.
Yes, that's
She
right.
was all in it. She was like, hey, we got stuff to do.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
So I'm in that right now.
Yes.
And the other person that just keeps coming to me, because everybody's talking about voting and elections and all this stuff, and I've just been sitting with her, is Shirley Chisholm.
Yes.
And in my work, and the work that I'm doing right now, so I just started a thing called the Black Futures Lab, which is really about reimagining what does it mean to build political power with and for black people, and independent of these vehicles that don't serve us. So what does it mean to be in that liminal space, which is not an abstentionist space? It's not we don't care about what you're doing. We have to, because you have power. But it is about how do we get creative about how we think about what political power can look like for black people in this moment. And there's a lot of conversation happening about the importance of black women in elections. There's a lot of conversation about the power of the black vote, which is, shouldn't have been a new conversation, but
Yeah.
people are just joining the party, so.
That's right.
And, Shirley Chisholm was not conflicted.
Yep.
She was very clear.
Yep.
And she was clear about two things. One, she was clear that democracy as it was being described was not at all democratic. And so her stance was not to keep talking about how it wasn't democratic. Her stance was to say, pull up a chair.
Yep.
And that is a powerful stance, right? Because again,
Very
it's not
powerful.
about waiting to be invited. But there's also something in there that I think she was also talking about, which was when you pull up a folding chair around a table, it actually makes the table bigger.
Yeah, yeah.
Have you noticed that?
Yeah.
Like, I think about
It's
Thanksgiving
really true.
dinners and things like
Yeah,
that. When
yeah.
somebody's pulling up a folding chair, everybody else got to move back
Yep,
to
that's
create
right.
room.
Yep.
So that was something she was really clear on, and I hear that from her. And then the other thing she was very clear on was power is important, and we should not be afraid of it. So that's who's here for me.
Yes. That last one, that one kind of went inside of me,
Didn't
too.
it?
Yeah. No, that's good. I'm thinking back to Harriet Tubman, and when I first learned about Harriet Tubman, when I was growing up, there were these comic books called Golden Legacy comic books. I think they were out of print when you were coming up. Who knew Golden Legacy comic books? Okay, remember those so that's, and I would get them, every month or something, like, here's, Crispus Attucks. Here's Frederick Douglass.
Yes.
And the Harriet Tubman one, the thing that I remember so vividly in the Harriet Tubman story was also, putting the gun and saying, like, no, you're not turning back. So I think not everyone's coming with you comes before you get on that journey, but I wonder how you think about that kind of moment when, okay, no, actually, we're here together, and you can't, if you turn back, you'll mess it up for all of us. How do you think about that moment in community?
Well, I'm so glad you asked. Isn't that the spirit of Black Lives Matter? So the way that what came to me in that very moment was like, that was Harriet's strategy with those of us who wanted to be free, but weren't sure that we could take the risk. Part of Harriet's story is also that her heart was broken by the people that she loved the most. Her husband, for example, didn't come with her on her first journey. He was supposed to. He didn't come. She came back for him. He had remarried. And he said, I'm not coming. This is the love of your life.
Yes.
And you took a risk that they said they were going to take with you, and they didn't do it, and you still came back to come and get them, and then they told you again, I'm not coming, and I built a whole other life because I didn't think you were going to make it. Isn't that what that's saying?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
There's another story about one of her siblings who also was supposed to go with her and didn't go. So when I think about that and I think about BLM, I think that where we've come into this particular moment, it's really about, some people, critics of BLM, there's a lot of critics and there's a lot of critiques, but one of the critiques is like, why are you trying to tell white people that Black Lives Matter? And in response, I would say, no, it's actually about reminding us.
Yep.
And challenging us to reimagine what is possible for us. And also knowing that the people that you would imagine would be by your side for very many reasons, sometimes aren't.
Yep.
Sometimes can't come.
Yep.
Because they can't imagine.
Yep.
Not only that you will be safe on the other side of the risk that you took, but there's also something about not believing that change is actually possible.
Yeah.
And this is a struggle that we have with our own people.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
When we are talking about, I'll just say, just as a bit of context in history, Black Lives Matter was a thing that was happening, and we were actually really quiet about being behind it. And the only reason that we stepped out and said, hey,
You and Patrice and Opal?
me, Patrice, and Opal, and said, hey, this is a thing that we created, was because there were, I'm not going to name these folks, child.
Okay. Okay.
But there were folks who were taking Black Lives Matter
Oh, yeah.
and weaponizing it in a way that was intended to defang it,
Yep.
to depoliticize it.
Yep.
They wanted it because they could tell it was generating energy and motion,
Yep.
but they didn't want what was on the other side of that energy and motion.
That has happened. That is a syndrome. You
It
know?
is.
Yeah.
It
Yep.
is.
Yep. Yep.
So that's why Harriet is so close to me
Yep.
in my heart.
Yep.
Because what that gun was about was not just about putting it at someone's back and being like, I wish you would.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But I think it was also about holding the reality that you're going to get your heart broken in the process
Yep.
of trying to get free.
Yep.
And you still have to keep going.
Oh my goodness, yes. Wow. Wow. You know, I'm thinking, to the historical figures, I wrote a poem about Henry Box Brown. And there's a line in it where I say, freedom was near but unimaginable. So here you are, you're trying to figure out, you got to be ingenious about how to get out of slavery. So you have someone mail you in a box, in a crate, to Philadelphia. So what I did in the poem was, I want to imagine that journey. Just like I want to imagine, Harriet Jacobs spent 7 years in a crawl space, hearing her children outside. Like, what does it mean to really, and I think that too, to the role of art, to be able to imagine and put forth freedom visions, because maybe that helps with people feeling like they can stay on the journey. Because it is hard to imagine what it looks like. The big it that is freedom.
That's right.
It really is. I'm thinking another, what you were saying about being in New Orleans and about living with our ancestors, but also about living with death. And, so much in the culture here, I think, has figured out really amazing ways that our dead can be present with us. But I've been thinking, and the Trayvon moment, you mark that moment as being a signal moment for you, George Zimmerman's acquittal. And for me, that signal moment was one with my sons, because their hearts broke. Because they are, this is the Trayvon generation. And these are kids, we know there's always been police brutality, but these are kids, I think the difference is, who have been watching their violation on their phones. I always say, I'd be like, could my kids get home without seeing a police shooting 50 times on their phone? Could I know that they would at least watch it for the first time with me? No. So I think, one offering to this theme is from Gwendolyn Brooks, who's really kind of my most important poet. And this is, to the changing same of living with this kind of violence, but also to talking and thinking about what's different now and how we can address it. And this is Brooks's poem. I don't know if you know it, "The Boy Died in My Alley." You know this poem? So this is Gwendolyn Brooks, and she wrote this, probably this was about maybe 1990. "The boy died in my alley, to running boy. The boy died in my alley without my having known. Policeman said next morning, a apparently died alone. You heard a shot, policeman said. Shots I hear and shots I hear. I never see the dead. The shot that killed him, yes, I heard, as I heard the 1,000 shots before, careening tinnily down the nights across my years and arteries. Policeman pounded on my door. Who is it? Police, policeman yelled. A boy was dying in your alley. A boy is dead and in your alley. And have you known this boy before? I have known this boy before. I have known this boy before who ornaments my alley. I never saw his face at all. I never saw his future fall, but I have known this boy. I have always heard him deal with death. I have always heard the shout, the volley. I have closed my heart ears late and early, and I have killed him ever. I joined the wild and killed him with unknowledgeable unknowing. I saw where he was going. I saw him crossed and seeing, I did not take him down. He cried not only father, but mother, sister, brother. The cry climbed up the alley. It went up to the wind. It hung upon the heaven for a long stretched strain of moment. The red floor of my alley is a special speech to me. So that's Brooks. And, in her much earlier poem, she wrote called The Last Quatrain of the Ballad of Emmett Till. There's an echo of some of that language at the end. And so that poem, which I think I can do, is very short. And it says, Emmett's mother was a pretty-faced thing, the tint of pulled taffy. She sits at her kitchen table, drinking black coffee. She kisses her killed boy, and she is sorry. Chaos in windy gray, in a red prairie. So I think what I think is tough and interesting in both of those is that black mothers, black women, do not bear responsibility for Emmett Till or for police shootings. And yet what Brooks is saying is, how do we save our children? Collectively, not just our, blood children. Emmett Till, Mamie Till would give him to all of us. And here she's also talking about a child, not the child of her immediate family, but a child she claims as all of our children are ours. So, that's kind of putting a lot of things out there, but I thought that might open some things up.
Yes, it opens up a lot. Can I start here? As you were reading that poem about the boy who died in her alley, Sandra Bland came to my mind. Mm-hmm. And the tension that I'm always moving in between, because for us, Trayvon's murder was not the catalyst. It was the acquittal of his murderer.
Yes. Yes.
And yet there's a way in which Black death becomes gendered. Mm-hmm. And I don't know how to deal with that. Mm-hmm. Because the murders of Black boys is prevalent and it is exponential. Mm-hmm. And Black death is not limited to Black boys.
Yep.
And so I have spent the last 5 years trying to figure out how to not erase anyone mm-hmm. in that equation. And mm-hmm. It is a point of tension.
Yeah.
It is also a point of why there is so much pushback around BLM. Mm-hmm. Because if BLM was led by black men,
Yeah.
we'd be having a really different conversation.
Yes.
The other thing that comes up for me in that is that there's a thing for us as black people where we are holding this tension as well. Mamie Till, Wanda Johnson, who's Oscar Grant's mother, Mike Brown's mother, Eric Garner's mother. They have all kind of come together as a coven in some way.
Yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah.
To avenge the death of their children.
Yep.
And I still can't help but think about Sandra's mom. And I can't help think about Ilan Nettles' mother, who are also holding Black Death.
Yes.
But one of the tensions with Black people is that we're not holding those deaths in the same way. And it creates a friction that I don't know that we've been able to grapple with. I read something recently, and I was trying to recall who said it, but somebody said, oh, it was Michelle Obama. She said, we have to be different with our sons.
She said that to me, actually.
Like literally to you?
That was from, we did a conversation at the opening of the Obama Summit, for real. Yeah.
Did you feel that? That is so dope.
Yeah, yeah, and we were talking about, and I said sort of, what about our boys? And she was not having
No,
it.
she wasn't.
Not having it, because she had been talking about cherishing our girls, and I was like, yes.
Yeah.
And it was a very interesting
so
moment. Isn't that crazy?
That's
Yes.
wild.
So please, but go ahead. I got excited.
You're like, who said that?
Yes, she said that.
And I'm sitting with that. Even in my own family, I took care of myself. My mother takes care of my brother to this very day.
Girl.
That child.
Girl.
That child who is not a child anymore.
Yeah. Yep.
He still can't do laundry.
Yep.
My mom is always fixing him a plate, AKA cooking for him every day.
Yeah.
And so I'm putting this here for us just to sit with a little bit, because there's not an easy answer. But there's something to be unlocked in that, where there's things that are happening simultaneously. So one thing that is happening simultaneously is that we, as Black people, are trying to make sense of why our children are being killed. And oftentimes, we will talk about how our children are killing each other. And then we will also, when given permission, talk about how police are killing our children, how vigilantes are killing our children. And then there's something that's like stirring around in there that is about what we were just talking about with Harriet, which is about, do we believe as deeply as we think we do? That there are some things that are within our control, and there are some things that we did not design. And so we are trying to figure out how we go in between those things. Does that make sense? So one of the things that we talk about at BLM a lot is we say, we don't want to be held responsible for conditions that we didn't create. And so that is why we can say that Black Lives Matter under any circumstances, no matter what you're doing, no matter what situation you're in. Trayvon became a symbol because people resisted the notion that he deserved to die because of mistakes he had made, or his hoodie that he was wearing, or all of these things, right? And it is essentially, I think, a challenge to us to reclaim and reimagine, what does Black look like with dignity on?
Yeah.
What does Black look like with dignity on? And who gets access to Black dignity? Whose birthright is that? That is something that we are struggling with. And it's the resolution of which will open up new contradictions, but certainly also new possibilities.
You said a lot. You know, and I'm thinking back to Sandra Bland's mother and the question of the deaths that get memorialized. You know, and one of the things, you know, what racists are trying to do by killing us is make object lessons of us, so that others of us will not exceed the space in which they want us to be. So, you know, the Klan, you know, will, you know, kill people and tie bodies to the car and drive them through the center of town because they wanted everybody to know who was in charge and what would happen if they stepped out. So that is American history. So I think what's interesting about those object lessons is, what do Black people take from them when they identify? So this is going to take me a minute, but it's getting to the question of identifying, you know, young Black teenage boys identifying with the vulnerability of the Trayvon, and how to keep our kids safe but fearless. You know, that's something that I work with a lot. You know, I mean, when the next thing, I think it was the Eric Garner, you know, I can't even remember all of the things, but I think it was Eric Garner, the big signal moment that triggered the marches in New York was
Eric Garner.
It was his death. So I feel like it was something, but
there were several points.
One
was his death. The next was his killer's acquittal.
The acquittal.
And then very soon after, it was the acquittal of Darren Wilson. The refusal of the
and that
grand
was
jury
convergent. That's
to
exactly.
Actually indict.
Okay, and that's when the marches happened in New York, because, and here, so now my kids are 15 and 16. And they come home from school, and New York is just, and they say, Mama, we have to be out there. And I'm feeling both like, you know, you actually have to stay right here, right now, but also, and so we went out there. You know, we went out there. And that was really important. But the point is that they felt an identification. So how do we identify across gender? And do we need, I mean, there's actually something kind of awful about the object lesson being there for you to identify with, because of my dad, who's 84 years old. I was talking to him once about Emmett Till, and I said, what did that, you know, when the picture was in jet, what did that mean to you? And he said, well, obviously it was a terrifying thing, but it didn't terrify me because I was from Harlem. I wasn't going to the South. I didn't go to Mississippi. You know, I wasn't going to go be with those people. He said, what scared me was Medgar Evers, because my dad also was involved with justice work, and so he thought, like, if fighting for Black people can get you killed in front of your family in your driveway, then that is a moment to take pause. So what I'm just thinking about is, you know, stories that are lifted up for all of us to be able to identify with other human beings, but how are stories of women lifted up in ways that not only might we identify with them, but also that our young men would identify with them as well. Yeah.
That's a big one.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm not, I don't know that there is that kind of story.
Mm-hmm.
I think nowadays that movements are patchwork quilts.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody who becomes a part of them has their own unique entry point.
Mm-hmm.
And the task for all of us is to figure out how do we learn to listen to those stories
Mm-hmm.
and not put them in hierarchies,
Mm-hmm.
not make one better than the other, but instead really draw from what is the through line amongst all of this tapestry,
Mm-hmm.
right? And what can we draw from that?
Mm-hmm.
And what about that through line or those many lines that come through can get woven into a different fabric?
Mm-hmm.
Makes sense?
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
we see this a lot. I mean, I would say that that is both intergenerational tension,
Mm-hmm.
and it is also it is also the tension of where you come into this long, long history of struggle,
Mm-hmm.
and can we make space for each other?
Mm-hmm.
So this is true with Ferguson,
Mm-hmm.
right? We have a conversation happening about who started this movement. And I'm like, the answer is none of us.
Mm-hmm.
Really, the question should be, where did you come into this movement?
Mm-hmm.
For some, it was Trayvon.
Mm-hmm.
For some, it was Troy Davis.
Mm-hmm.
For some, it was Oscar Grant. For others, it was Melissa Alexander.
Mm-hmm.
For still others, it was Renisha McBride.
Mm-hmm.
For still others, it was Penny Proud. And how can we open that door and say, welcome, and how did you get here, and who are your people?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right? For me, it was Katrina.
Mm-hmm.
It was Katrina. And sitting in my house in Oakland, California, and watching people, black people, on roofs,
Yep.
and knowing, like instinctually knowing that nobody was coming.
Yep.
And taking stock of what did that mean about everything I had ever been taught about where I live and who I am and what is possible for me,
Mm-hmm.
and who was coming to save me.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when I realized nobody is
Yeah.
coming to save me. We have to be in relationship to each other much differently.
We are the ones we have been waiting for.
Absolutely.
June again. Yeah.
So if we can sit in that, I think there's a lot of lessons for us in terms of how do we understand the conflicts that come up as things that are not just fodder on social media or like entertainment, but really how do we understand it also as a part of the tapestry of this political moment, and also a blank canvas in some way, because we get to write whatever stories we want about what our movement moment is.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
Last thing I want to just say on that piece is that you asked me earlier about what words I carry with me,
Mm-hmm.
and dignity is a big one.
Yes.
It's a big one. I spend a lot of time, and I think my contribution, if I was to name one, I would say that my contribution is restoring dignity
Oh, beautiful.
to those of us that have lost it or had it taken away.
Mm-hmm.
That's my particular role. Everybody has their own role to play.
Yes.
And then that serves my own sense of dignity,
Mm-hmm.
right? So being able to be a part of transforming how we understand who we are
Mm-hmm.
and what we deserve,
Mm-hmm.
so that we can be better warriors and more human ones.
Mm-hmm. That's so beautiful. You are so dignified. You really are. It's something to behold.
Thank you.
I think also, what that leads me into is something I really wanted to talk about, and I'm thinking about intimacy and intimate communities and family and the way we live our lives. I think that so much of there's what happens out there, but as my mother always would say when I would be worried about the kids or this or that, she'd say, they do live in your house, don't they? I was like, yeah, they live in my house. She's like, well, use your advantage. How the community you make in that circle, that's right, is what you have. But I think also, about being a warrior woman and about, taking care of yourself and about making community that is fortifying. So I would love to know just more about your life in that way, what you might like to share, but also how you think about taking care of yourself and your people.
I'm working on it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a work in progress.
Yes.
So there's a few things that I feel are really important for my own sustainability. One of those pieces is my community. It's really important to me, really important to me. And for me to be resilient, I need to have a place where I can fall apart.
Yep.
And that is something I protect fiercely,
Mm-hmm.
which also translates to being perceived as maybe standoffish, right? Like I have to have my, I have to know where I begin and where you begin, and then there has to be choice in there.
Yes.
And caring for myself in this moment has made it more necessary to be okay with having boundaries.
Yep.
And getting to have decision making over when I let those boundaries be permeable or not.
Yep.
And people don't like it.
Yep.
But I don't care.
Yeah, and it's so important to exemplify that.
It's hard.
Yeah, I know.
It's hard because
I know.
we're also socialized in a very different way.
Yeah.
And also in this moment where we've made organizers influencers and celebrities. The question of access doesn't have agency in it.
Yep.
Right? So at any given moment, somebody will want to talk to me about the movement or some criticism they have or some idea they have, and I'm like, this is great.
Yep.
I don't want to do this right now.
Yeah.
And so part of what it means for me to care for myself is to not always be on and to really fiercely protect that.
Yep.
And then the last thing that has been really important for me has been, and this is a new practice, which is a meditation practice. I find myself holding my breath a lot.
Me too. Yeah. Yeah.
Like all of a sudden I'm like, I don't think I've been breathing.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, it's not good. No.
It's not
Gotta
good.
breathe.
It's
Yeah.
definitely not good. Or at least it doesn't serve me.
Yep.
So I've been really trying to be in a practice of breathing and paying attention to my breath, which reminds me that I'm alive.
Yep.
It also allows me to focus. And then the third thing it allows me to do is scan. It's like all of a sudden I'm aware of places where there's other blockages that I wasn't
in your body.
aware of before.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
I'm holding my breath.
Yeah.
When there's oxygen moving through.
That's right.
And I'm like, oh, something's going on in here.
Yep.
Or, oh, my back is hurting.
Yep.
And then I have to make some other choices about what are you going to do to take care of that,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's that.
Yeah.
Community, breathing, and boundaries.
Yep.
How
Yep.
about you?
My breathing, I love yoga.
Yes,
And it's similarly that feeling like, oh, didn't know that was a problem, and I believe it is a problem.
I didn't know that was a muscle.
Didn't know that was a muscle. And I think that also because, with the mind always racing with so many things to think about, and just trying to be useful, because the way that I was brought up was to be a useful, helpful person. And so the scroll just keeps going, it keeps going, it keeps going, and to try to really be present. I mean, these are sort of not original thoughts, but very distilled and useful ones.
Yes.
I think it really, 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 really matters. And I think, also, community not only being a place to fall apart, but also a place for like soul-shaking laughter. And I have a lot of sister friends, but my best friend today, like we were texting each other all day, like big old meetings, all kinds of places, like, girl, because I needed to tell her things, and we were making each other laugh inappropriately in the places where we weren't supposed to be. But having that just shakeout, and I find more and more also with my girlfriends. This weekend I traveled for a 54th birthday party, and I will much more make time and say yes for that, because it's precious for us to be together. And again, what usually ends up happening is just soul-shaking laughter, often when we're talking about things that are very distressing. Very, very, very distressing. But that is just everything, to go through this life. I mean, I use the word village a lot. But in, one of the things that I think and talk about a lot, I lost my husband very unexpectedly 5.5 years ago. Thank you. And he was a very remarkable, very magical person. And one of the other things, I'll leave this with you, but I wrote a memoir that is, it's about love and loss, but really what it's about is about Black love, and about Black love between two artists. He was a painter and a chef, and he was a person who was a refugee from Eritrea, was a freedom fighter, and what it meant to live in that reality and bring children up that way. So I say that, I brought him up, I wanted to say that. And I was talking about, that when we lost him, we had just celebrated his 50th birthday. And that everyone came and everyone spoke their heart. And it doesn't, it's not okay. But it mattered. And then the other thing I wanted to say was thinking a lot and telling my kids and thinking about, what does the family that you start out in is not the family you're going to go through life in. And so really thinking about what is a very broad notion of queer family. That means that, it's not always mommy and daddy and the kids in the station wagon. And it's not that way actually for anybody. So now, oh wow, I live upstairs from my parents. I didn't know that was going to happen again. But they came and moved, they sold their house and came so that I could travel for work, so that someone would give my kids dinner. I didn't think that's where we were going. And now they're very elderly, and now they need us. And my kids have been raised by aunties who are not my blood, but who are aunties. And, just it's always changing shape, and there's always a folding chair at the table. And having that, ethic, I think is really, really, really important and sustaining. I grew up in a family, my dad was of service, and I think that made us very closed. People were always calling the house needing something from him. And so I developed very good phone manners. You know, like, he's not available right now because he's helping somebody else, and we're trying to have dinner. But so we were and my parents both only children. And so thinking about, okay, well, how might I do this, you know, taking from this childhood, but doing it a little bit differently, with the door a little bit more open, but also understanding about boundaries. Because I married someone from a big African family, and like they would like show up for 3 months, you know, to like have an operation, you know, like suddenly, or like show up with children to be educated, or you know, something, and you know, and so that was like, so we did that, you know, but I won't say that it was always easy figuring out how to do that. I'm glad my kids saw that, but I'm glad they also saw me say, okay, well, we can't. So it's that sort of dual ethic, I think, that says live life in a generous way and understand that human beings need each other in shapes that change. But also, I really love what you say about boundaries, and I think it's crucially important because we can't, you know, you can find yourself without resources if you let people.
That's right.
It's like I say, like, are we all like, you
That's
know,
right.
titties for the world? You know what I mean? Like hundreds of them hanging all over us.
Yes, yes.
That's not sustainable, right?
Not sustainable.
Okay, is it time for questions? I think it really was time for questions.
All righty. Good evening, everyone. I'm Kara Olledge. I'm the Executive Director of the Amistad Research Center. And first and foremost, I really and truly want to thank Elizabeth Alexander and Alicia Garza for being here tonight with us. We have been working on this project for months. It's not, it's been a dream come true for us. We wanted to wait for the stars to align. We weren't changing anything up. And when we both got them on the same date and the same time, we were like, let's do it. So I appreciate everybody in the room tonight because what you're hearing is an incredible type of brilliance, eloquence, transparency, honesty, and just to have that right now in this climate is so very refreshing. So thank you. Now it's time for questions, but we got a couple of housekeeping rules without questions. First and foremost, brevity. Let's be brief, okay? We know we have a lot of people who are probably really wanting to ask some questions. The second thing we want to keep mindful of the themes that we heard tonight: love, dignity, community. And lastly, I want to say that there is a difference between critique and attack. And the one thing we won't do tonight is attack. And I want everyone to be committed to that. So Chris, who's our Director of Library Reference Services, he is my partner in this. We're going to be on your side, watching the clock. Okay? So I want to start with some questions, and if everybody could line up here, and we're actually going to have you stand here because the projector's kind of in the way of the aisle. Okay?
Good evening. Thanks to the Amistad for putting on this very important conversation to start 2018 off. And my question is, where have you been at? I've been waiting on you. Thank you for being here this evening and sharing this information with us, and I've gotten a lot out of it. I think there's a direct connection between you, Harriet Tubman, Martin Delaney, Medgar Evers, and a ton of other people. So thank you for being here, and thanks again to the Amistad.
Thank you.
Question. I'm sorry I came late, but I was able to catch a lot of gems in the time that I showed up. The first thing I want to say is thank you for your courage and your willingness to be thrust into the canons of those that have been considered great. You may not feel that yet, I don't know, but thank you for allowing yourself to be put in that space. So I have a comment, and I guess I have a question. I can appreciate your question of what does putting on dignity look like? Because as a mother of 2 black boys, one who is 18 and the other is 6, I see it because I raised them to be dignified. The thing that I'm afraid of is they will leave my bubble and my cocoon and hear and see and be treated as if they are not. And I think that's the thing that as a parent I'm often sad about, and yet at the same time it is what it is, and so I have to sort of keep pushing forward. So again, to I guess speak to that question, I think black mothers see it. I think we try to socialize and teach to be dignified. It's when our children enter the world that we have to deal with what happens there. The other thing that I guess my question is, I said, I see you as courageous. What are you afraid of in this work? What is your fear?
That's a great question. Everything. Seriously, everything. To name some specifics, I am terrified that this window will close and that we will go back to exactly what we were doing before with a greater consciousness of what we were doing, but not any shift that we can feel. And I don't mean laws, like I just mean like a real shift. I am terrified that that we'll be martyred. I want to live a long life. I want to be like 110, like Dorothy Burnham, who is painting and traveling and rabble-rousing and driving her children nuts. That's who I want to be. And we're being labeled Black identity extremists. And it's specific to us. I am fiercely independent. Like I don't like people rolling with me. I like to just do my thing. I don't like telling anybody what I'm doing, where I'm going, right? My mama can tell you that. She's like, I tried, right? And I'm finding that I have to do that now, and I don't like it. I don't like it. I don't like that I had to put a security system in my apartment. I don't like that I have to think about being in a room like this with you all and somebody coming that was watching a little too much Fox News. And I don't like the fact that every time there's a knock at my door, I'm not sure what's on the other side of it. That's what I'm afraid of. And that drives me in a certain way to take care of myself differently, because I also don't, it's okay to be scared, but fear is an interesting thing, and it can change, I feel like it can change your DNA. And so I'm really trying to be a free radical, literally and figuratively, and let that fear teach me something about what I'm capable of.
Thank you.
Yeah. How about you?
You know, I'm afraid of not being able to stay physically strong and ready for what I have to do, as time goes by. I'm afraid of targeted or accidental harm. Yes, coming to the people I love, of course. And I'm worried too about, what I said earlier, I try to almost just plow right through it because I think ultimately that's the best use of energies. But when I do see arguments about Black inhumanity in every relevant sphere gaining traction, being taken as fact, being given airspace, being given airtime, I don't know where that lands, so I find that terrifying. It's, to the very core, our humanity. And I think that, to something that you said that we know, which is that if Black people are truly free, then everyone is free. The way that I sort of would keep people come at that critique, well, you gave all this money to Black people, Black culture. Yes. Because by being excluded, you have a better shot of having a sense of what it means to be inclusive. But you have to come with excellence, you have to come with brilliance, you have to come with, kaleidoscopic vision of the kind that to be an awake and aware Black person you have to have. You have to be able to look around all sides. It's one of our superpowers, So, but I do feel scared that, just like a thread, that suddenly so much does feel unraveled. But I try to push past that. Yeah.
Thank you for your question.
First of all, oh, I'm too close. I forget that my voice projects. First of all, I want to say you're my best birthday party gift. On the 17th of January, I made 85.
Yes.
And it was a pleasure for me to sit and reminisce with you because some of your favorite people clearly are my favorite people. I got to know Shirley Chisholm personally, and she was in my home several times with a group of Black women here in the city of New Orleans. But most of all, don't stop talking. Don't stop giving to us. Those of us who, in some cases, have experienced, in some cases haven't experienced, need to know. We need to know and understand and try to feel both the whites and the Blacks. The whites have more work to do, but we are all in it together. And if I'm down, so are they.
Yes, I heard that. Thank you.
Hello. Oh,
Hi.
wow. This mic is hot for real. My name is Mwende, and thank you all, first of all, for this. This was really great. There's so many things to touch on, but the thing that sat with me the whole time was this idea of how do we keep our kids safe but fearless. And I say I don't have any children of my own, but I spend a lot of time working with young people, both as an organizer and a teacher, and also as a poet. I swear my fan base is like 99% high school girls who are just like, oh, and her. But like, they're always messaging me being like, you've really inspired me to speak out and do this, and I'm just gonna, and I'm like, that's awesome. And like from personal experience, like that it's really scary, and I don't even know for myself if I've found that line between what it means to be safe and fearless, because I feel like part of fearlessness is understanding the risk that is coming out with it and accepting it. So I guess I'm asking to you all not to like separate your identities, but to you as a writer, like how do you navigate that line, and also as a mother, and then to you as an organizer who is undoubtedly influencing so many young people who are, you know, they're shifting and whatever, and you're not necessarily in control of the ways that they shift, but how do you all navigate that line of making people fearless while also understanding that that at times means throwing safety, you know, out the door?
That's a great question. That's a great question. That's a tough question. I just had a conversation with one of my sons around a choice that wasn't his wisest. And I was talking to him, first I had to cuss him out, and then after we were done with that, like, you're okay. But the conversation was also about how not to be afraid, you know. I think sometimes I think back to physical risks, spirit risks, heart risks, you know, that how much we learn from that, how much we're shaped by that. So, I mean, I think it's always this kind of toggle, right, between being acutely aware of the world around you, assessing risk, but also, you know, I mean, fear will drive you totally inside. You can't live that way. I think that what has been also wonderful for my kids, as for me, is my dad, who's 84 now, and he's always said, you know, he's just a warrior. And among the many things he's always said, one of them is always raise your voice because you never know who's listening. Right? Those high school girls, you never know who's listening. And he said, sometimes you'll raise your voice and the room will be silent. And, you know, and he's very, you know, he's a very blunt Harlemite. He's like, you think you farted in the room be so silent. Nobody's responding to what you said. And you may never find out how that thing landed. But you have to offer what you have, because we have all had the experience constantly of hearing something we needed and making use of it. So I don't have, and I guess also to the question of what can be exemplified in making art, I do think you have to make art fearlessly, and I think any false syllable, don't write it, don't publish it, don't speak it, don't say it. Don't make art if you can't tell the truth every nanosecond. I don't want it in the world if it's not that true. Because that is the sacred thing that artists are there to do. Human history passes through us, and we are just the vessels, and hopefully develop some craft so that we can express it in a way that is, you know, that people can see what the thing is. But I do think, like, you know, I am absolutely rigorous about fearlessness. And, you know, people suffer for their words, are punished for their words, are jailed for their words, die for their words. This is true. But I think that if it is the choice that you make to share your gift with the world in that way, then I think we are impoverished when people put out half-truths that are decorated to momentarily distract us, you know? And if you have good craft, you can figure out how to do that, you see, and that's a danger too. So that's why, you know, part of being a great artist is also about, like, that bone, that core of integrity and truth. So, you know, to the people who have been our guiding lights today, you know, people like Elizabeth Catlett and June Jordan and Audre Lorde, I mean, please, did she ever write a syllable, like a whisper, a hair that was not necessary? So, I mean, I think that's, you know, that's sort of, it's not just that it's the bar, it's more that it's the reminder. you know, and so that's where I think that fearlessness is really called for.
So I'm an organizer that's trying to write a book. It's like the most painful process ever. Because it is deeply laden with insecurities. Who gets to tell this story? And what stories are appropriate to tell? And what does appropriate even mean in a context like this? And then when you're so public, there's a lot of stuff that happens that because of integrity, we make choices not to bring to the light. And that seems contradictory in some ways, but it goes back to who gets to tell the story. It's something I'm really struggling with, I'll be honest. I want to make sure that there is a time capsule that gets preserved. That is my, how I understand how we got here and my vision for where we go. And there's stuff that comes in and out of there that I'm like, do I tell it if I can't tell the whole thing? It would help you better understand what's happening and why this is happening and why you see what you see and where all these different people come in and why there's, how those threads came to be. It's one perspective, and I just struggle with it all the time. Because I don't want to dance around it, because then it's almost like creates more hunger for the tea, you know what I mean? But I'm sifting through, like, what absolutely needs to be said, even if it's hard? And then what could be said, but might eventually be said by someone else at some point? And the reason I bring that up is because you asked, how do you deal with, or how do you navigate, right, the process of both being fearless, right, but then also the responsibility that you carry when what comes through you, right, lands with someone else in a way that inspires them, and then they're looking to you for more. And it's a big responsibility, and how do you hold that? And also something I'm working through, really. Like, sometimes I'm like, why did I open my mouth? Like, why did I? Like, you just had to put it on there, didn't you? You know what I mean? And then the thing that always kind of stirs in me is that part of how some of us have learned to be in movement, however we're here, is to identify, like, leaders that we iconicize. I'm like, I'm not dead, and I don't need to be canonized in any way, right? I'm still very much in process and, like, learning at the same time that that I'm teaching or inspiring in a way. And the thing that happens too is, like, people be like, I'm inspired, so now what do I do? Give me the answer. And I'm like, I ain't got it. I thought we was gonna figure that out together. You know what I mean? Like, so I just want you to know that that's a thing, and to not feel like you need to be responsible for the answers, but instead to be an invitation to create those answers together and to make a lot of mistakes together. So the the fans that you have that are messaging you like, yo, that thing you said inspired me. Track what they're doing, right? So the thing that came to me too was like, somebody said to me, and I'm trying to, oh, I know who this was. It was in a somatics course. If you don't know what somatics is, we don't have time to go into all of what somatics is and isn't. Just real, right? But there's this thing about being interested and not interesting. And I think one of the things that I'm really working with, like one of the ways that I'm able to hold the impact of the impact is to learn to be interested and not interesting. It's what's helping me grow right now.
Hello.
Hi.
I'm tall, so my name is Jewel. So thank you so much for coming to Tulane and speaking to us. I have been highly anticipating this. I took off work for this. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So you all discussed the conflict of representation of Black women and Black people of all genders within this fight for freedom, liberation, and justice. And one thing that sits really heavily on my heart is a lot of times how a lot of the movements that have been created in protecting Black people have been led or started by Black women or people that are not men, and how oftentimes they continue to be left out of the conversation and how you guys were discussing. And so my question is, I know that we cannot always change people's minds and their mindset based off the way they were raised or just as individuals, but how do we, through our actions, lead by example in representing the intersectionality of the Black community's fight?
Big question. Thank you for it. You hit on something that impacts me in a pretty big way. And it's interesting, actually, earlier, I have to correct myself, you talked about Kimberly, and I thought you were talking about Dr. Crenshaw. So I was like, I was with her last night. You were like, really? Because that was my girl, Kimberly Drew, who I don't know, and I'm sure she's amazing.
She was an old friend as well, and an amazing woman.
I was like, so let me correct the record in case when you know her. But you know, we were talking yesterday, because interestingly, we both were at the Women's March, and there was so much tied into that, but we got a chance to spend some time together afterwards. And we were talking about how there's still so much work to do and be done to embody intersectionality as a practice of liberation and as a way of understanding how power operates. So what I mean by that is it's gotten very distorted. The way that we understand intersectionality has gotten very distorted. It's become a buzzword and a brand, much like Black Lives Matter, right? So everything is now intersectional or it's not intersectional.
Yeah.
And really, the only thing that intersectionality is trying to talk about is how power moves.
Power, yep.
Right? So a lot of the way that we tend to use it now is like as representation, you know, like, oh, this room is intersectional. I'm not sure that's true.
Yeah.
Or relevant, right? There are a lot of different people here with many different identities, but that doesn't make this an intersectional room. And so I guess what I'm offering here is Black women or Black people who don't identify as cisgender men being in the forefront of movements and not being acknowledged, for me, is about a lot of different things, but mostly it's about power, and it tells me where we still have work to do.
Yep, yep.
It tells me about our shape, and tells me about who we are and who we long to be. It's a story, and the fact that that story keeps repeating itself in different contexts tells a story about what is important to us, and also what we're holding on to. And as I said earlier tonight, I'm always really curious about why. Like, what does it serve? Everybody wants a Martin Luther King, but nobody wants an Ella Baker or a Polly Murray, right? And even Audrey, just to keep it 100, right? Like, people didn't want Audrey either. So that's what you're offering for us is a challenge to ask each of us. It's an invitation and it's a challenge to move each of us to really ask ourselves why. What in this moment, in a time of incredible upheaval, why are we holding on to Martin and shooing away Polly? What does that serve? And what do we lose? That's what I keep asking myself. What do we lose? It's not just about, finding the most marginalized of the most marginalized. That's also not intersectionality, right? Intersectionality is about power and privilege, and it's an acknowledgement that we operate, even just as individuals, we are both oppressed and oppressor. We are both privileged and marginalized. And our task, right, is to change the balance of power, but also to change how power operates, so that that duality can operate differently. Meaning, the process of getting to how do we get to a point where our being is not moved by exercising power over other people. Power over is the thing that needs to get transformed. And then how do we build power with so that everyone can have dignity? That's, I think, our challenge. And so we could talk forever about who's in and who's out, right? But I'm much more interested in what's the invitation for us to transform how power moves. And I think that's what Kim would say is the point of intersectionality. I hope that was helpful.
That's so great. And yet, it was maybe about 3 months ago when it was going around on the internet, she just so crisply said, no, intersectionality is not. I mean, so that's a resource to people to look up. Kimberly Crenshaw's recent kind of reminder about what intersectionality, and as derived from her work, is all about. And I would only add that, African American studies resurrects the voices. I mean, I think about Barbara Ransby's biography of Ella Baker, her biography of Paul Robeson's wife as Landa Good Robeson, the kind of it's an amazing book, the scholarly, as Landa was as bad as Paul Robeson, right? The scholarship that helped us, to understand that Bayard Rustin, was a planner of the March on Washington. That wasn't the narrative that was in place. I think that there are so many wonderful projects that people are doing that are saying, we won't let these people be forgotten. And it really does matter that there are, books and biographies and critical studies that say who we've been all along. Yeah.
Unfortunately, I'm so sorry about this, but that was the last question. We want to thank everybody for being here tonight.